Stand still, ma'am! Hands up! The icy shout of a SWAT officer tore through the air at the corner of Haywood, Asheville. Before Clara could react, the crackle of a taser roared. The can of soup in her hand dropped, rolling haphazardly across the sidewalk. She collapsed, her body convulsing, not a single cry escaping her lips. The SWAT team spun around, guns trained on the elderly man nearby. Samuel Carver, a 70-year-old veteran, his worn jacket hanging on his shoulders, hands raised high, his gaze calm, unshaken. A young officer, voice trembling with adrenaline, stepped forward. "You're next!" Samuel didn't reply. He simply locked eyes with the commander, the radio crackling on his chest. Then he spoke. 5 words, neither shouting nor whispering. "Call General Caldwell right now." The team froze, guns still aimed, yet no one moved. The air grew heavy, tense. Could 5 words halt a trained SWAT team in its tracks? All right, my dear audience, brace yourselves for a story that'll leave you speechless. Take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly connect with what I'm sharing here, and drop a comment below to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always thrilling to see someone joining us from all corners of the world. Most folks in Asheville, North Carolina, know Samuel Carver by his rusted red pickup truck, parked outside the small wooden house on Patton Avenue, a few blocks from the bakery. That house, warm with pots of vibrant red geraniums Clara planted on the porch, stands like a quiet beacon among the stone-paved streets. At 70, Samuel moves slowly, his back slightly hunched under the weight of time. Yet his eyes, sharp, serene, seem to have seen the entire world and chosen silence. The town knows him only as the skilled handyman, the man who fixes kids' bicycles, who brings lawn mowers back to life before neighbors can finish explaining the problem. No one in Asheville guesses Samuel's past. Some think he was an engineer. Others whisper he's a veteran. But to them, he's just the man with calloused hands, always there when needed, his toolbox clinking at his side. The medals from covert missions with the U.S. Navy's Special Forces, once the shining glory of a soldier, now lie silent in a wooden box under the bed, gathering dust, never spoken of. Only Clara, his 68-year-old wife, knows the truth. Those sleepless nights when he stares into the dark, haunted by nameless missions, by decisions that saved lives but stole his sleep for years. Clara is the heartbeat of Samuel's world. Her smile, gentle as a warm autumn glow, soothes the invisible scars he carries from the battlefield. Every Saturday, she brings homemade bread, still fragrant with butter, to the Veterans Center, where old soldiers share stories only they understand. 42 years of marriage have made them inseparable, not a habit, but a force like gravity, a steady, unseen pull that outsiders rarely notice. Samuel's stories, heavy as the medals he hides, are shared only in the quiet between them, in moments when moonlight slips through the curtains. They are told once, and never spoken of again. They had no children, only a tranquil rhythm to their lives. Samuel fixed everything, from engines to the quiet voids in people's hearts, while Clara kept their flame of warmth alive. Every Sunday, like a clock never missing a beat, Samuel drove his pickup truck to the Veterans Center, where he built wheelchairs for old comrades. He never skipped his morning walk along the French Broad River, where sunlight gilded the dirt path. His tools were always neatly stored, never left out overnight, a ritual to maintain order amid the chaos he'd once faced. And each time he returned, he brought a bouquet of wildflowers, small daisies, lavender, plucked from the field near the river, placing them in Clara's hands. She smiled, eyes sparkling as if they were the most precious gift. That Wednesday began like any other. Samuel had just repaired a lawnmower for Mr. Jenkins down the street, his hands wiped clean with an old rag, the faint scent of motor oil lingering. Clara left early, her steps light on the sidewalk, heading to the grocery store on Haywood Road, where seniors' discounts drew her before the best cans of soup were gone. Autumn had painted the trees golden. The air was crisp, and Asheville lay peaceful, like a painting. Samuel folded the rag, tucked it into his pocket. His gaze swept the street. The leaves were just turning, the town hushed. Samuel was wiping his hands, the old rag stained with oil, when a sound cut through, tires screeching in the distance. Not the reckless squeal of teenage drivers, but something heavy, purposeful. He looked up, eyes narrowing, as 3 glossy black SUVs sped through the intersection, ignoring the red light, veering toward Haywood Road where Clara had gone. He didn't panic. He folded the rag, slipped it into his pocket, and began to walk, each step steady, as if he sensed their quiet rhythm was about to be shattered. The corner of Haywood and Walnut was usually calm in the early morning, with its old grocery store, faded sign, and ancient oak casting shade. But as Samuel reached the end of the block, he saw 3 matte black armored SUVs blocking the way, like jagged teeth. Yellow police tape was strung up hastily. One officer stood atop a vehicle, scanning through binoculars. Another, younger, shouted into a radio, voice taut with tension. Samuel approached slowly, as if nearing a wild animal, his eyes fixed on the cordon ahead, unwavering. That Wednesday, like any other, Samuel Carver began with his familiar rhythm. His calloused hands, still faintly scented with motor oil, had just finished repairing a wheelchair for a fellow veteran at the end of Patton Avenue. At 70, he moved slowly, but every action was precise, as if he were still the soldier leading nameless missions. In his heart, a steady beat pulsed, not for battlefields, but for Clara, the woman who'd anchored him to this world for 42 years. As he wiped his hands with an old rag, her image rose, her gentle smile, silver hair brushed lightly before the mirror, the canvas bag swaying as she left early, her steps soft toward the grocery store on Haywood Road. It was senior discount day. Clara, with her meticulous care, always arrived early to pick the best cans of soup. But then, a sound sliced through Samuel's thoughts. Tires screeching. Not the reckless squeal of kids, but something heavy, sharp, like war drums from years he'd tried to bury. His heart didn't race, but a cold, familiar chill from his marching days crept up his spine. Clara. Her name rang in his mind, clear as a command. He looked up, his sharp gaze sweeping the intersection. 3 glossy black SUVs roared past, ignoring the red light, heading toward Haywood Road. Her image, small, with her canvas bag and smile, flashed. A nameless fear tightened his chest, not for himself, but for her, the woman he'd sworn to protect until his last breath. Samuel didn't panic. Panic was a soldier's enemy. He folded the rag, tucked it into his pocket, the motion deliberate, like checking a weapon before battle. Each step he took was steady, resolute, but inside a storm churned. Memories of war, sleepless nights, decisions that saved lives but stole his dreams, surged. He forced them down. Only Clara. She was the light guiding him through darkness, the reason he still stood, still breathed, still lived. He couldn't let anything touch her. As he reached the corner of Haywood and Walnut, his pulse remained even, his chest tightened. The old grocery store, where he and Clara stopped weekly, was now a battlefield. 3 SUVs blocked the way. Blue and red lights flashed relentlessly. Yellow police tape, strung up hastily, fluttered. The SWAT team, in black armor, rifles gripped tight, surrounded the store, their stance taut like predators. One officer stood atop a vehicle, binoculars scanning, his gaze cold. Another, younger, shouted into a radio, voice breaking, each word a blade tearing through the peace Samuel and Clara had built. At the center of the cordon, Clara stood, small but unshaken. Her canvas bag, with a few cans of soup peeking out, was a testament to her simple life. The woman who only wanted to care for her husband, their little wooden house. Her eyes were wide, not with fear, but confusion, as if she were trying to grasp why the world had turned against her. In her mind, a whirlwind of thoughts swirled. What had she done wrong? Yet deep within, the resilience of a woman who'd stood by Samuel through every storm held her upright. She didn't crumble, didn't cry. She stood, her gaze bewildered but defiant, like a wildflower facing a gale. Samuel, from the end of the block, saw it all. His heart clenched, his hands stayed steady. Clara was the center of his world, and now she was threatened. Memories of failures, comrades he couldn't save, nights he woke to screams in his head, flickered. He banished them. Only Clara. He stepped forward, slowly, his eyes locked on the cordon. Each step was a reminder of his vow to Clara, that she'd always be safe no matter what darkness reached for her. In his heart, a steely resolve forged he wouldn't lose her, not today, not ever. Samuel Carver advanced, each step slow, deliberate, as if he were entering a familiar battlefield where every breath was calculated. In his heart, a storm of emotions swirled, but outwardly, he was a statue of steel, unshaken, unwavering. From the end of the block, he saw Clara, small amidst the cordon, her shoulders slightly raised, not from fear, but confusion. The canvas bag in her hand, with cans of soup peeking out, was a testament to the simplicity of a woman who only wanted to care for their little wooden house and the husband she loved. Her eyes were wide, her gaze bewildered, but unbroken, as if she were trying to make sense of a world suddenly turned alien. In Clara's mind, a tangle of thoughts churned. What had she done to be surrounded by these dark figures with guns? Yet deep within, the resilience of a woman who'd stood by Samuel through every storm kept her upright, defiant, like a wildflower before a gale. The SWAT team, in glossy black armor, rifles gripped tight, encircled her, their stance taut, like predators poised to strike. A young officer, face flushed with adrenaline, shouted, his voice breaking, ordering her to drop the bag. Clara, with the calm forged through 42 years beside Samuel, raised her other hand. The motion slow, non-threatening, only to show she meant no harm. But another officer flinched, reacting as if facing an enemy. The taser's crack exploded, sharp. It tore through the air. The canvas bag fell, cans of soup rolling across the pavement. Clara collapsed, her body convulsing, silver hair disheveled. In that moment, Clara's heart raced, not from pain, but from the injustice. She, who only wanted soup for dinner, now lay on cold asphalt, treated like a criminal. Samuel, watching from afar, felt his chest tighten, as if an invisible hand choked his breath. Clara, his light, the reason he returned from endless battlefield nights, was being hurt. Memories of failures, comrades he couldn't save, flickered like ghosts. He banished them. Only Clara. The fear of losing her, sharper than any blade he'd faced, drove him to move faster. He crossed the sidewalk, past the faded billboard. The SWAT team turned, guns aimed, a voice barking to step back. Samuel didn't hear. In his mind, only Clara's fall replayed, and the vow he'd made to her, that she'd always be safe, no matter what darkness reached for her. He stopped, not from fear, but to control. Hands raised high, palms open, steady, as he'd faced enemies in covert missions. His gaze locked onto the commander, whose rank badge and crackling radio sat on his chest. In Samuel's heart, a steely resolve forged. He wouldn't let this chaos swallow Clara. Without shouting, without whispering, he spoke 5 words, his voice low, sharp as a blade. "Call General Caldwell right now." Those words weren't just a request, they were a command, carrying the weight of a man who'd shaped missions this SWAT team only read about. The air seemed to freeze. No one lowered their guns. No one dared move. The commander frowned, his eyes wavering. The radio crackled like a heartbeat out of sync. In his mind, a spark of doubt flared. Who was this man? Samuel, still as stone, felt his pulse slow, as it did before life-or-death moments. He spoke again, voice even, like an old command from his leading days. "Check my jacket pocket, right lining." An older officer, eyes cautious, stepped forward. Gloved hands reached into Samuel's coat. He pulled out a metal badge, tarnished but sharp, bearing the mark of elite special forces. The SWAT team fell silent, as if time itself paused. That badge wasn't an ordinary veteran's. It was the emblem of a man who'd stood at the pinnacle of command, whose mistakes could cost a nation. In Samuel's heart, there was no triumph, only Clara. Her fall replayed in his mind, each moment a dagger. He stood, hands still raised, eyes fixed on the commander. But his thoughts were with Clara, lying on the pavement, small but unbowed. He knew the badge would change everything, but all he cared about was bringing her home, safe, to their simple rhythm. Dear audience, take a moment to relax, maybe grab a glass of water, then listen on. The story's twists await. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always exciting to see who's joining us from around the world. Comment 1 if you find this story gripping. Let us keep bringing you more. The radio crackled. A cold, sharp voice cut through the stifling air at the corner of Haywood and Walnut. Samuel Carver stood there, hands still raised. His gaze locked on the SWAT commander, but his mind was with Clara, where she sat, small, clutching the ice pack a medic had given her. In his heart, a storm of emotions raged. Pain at seeing Clara fall, fury at the injustice, and a steely resolve to bring her home safe. Yet outwardly, he was a monument of calm, each breath controlled, as when he led covert missions where one mistake could cost an entire team. 20 minutes passed, each second stretched into eternity. Then a charcoal gray SUV appeared silently. No siren, no lights. It stopped behind the SWAT line. General Marcus Caldwell, former Special Forces commander, stepped out, his stride firm. His salt and pepper hair glinted under the sun. He didn't glance at the SWAT team, didn't acknowledge the murmuring crowd gathering at a distance. His eyes sought Samuel, like a soldier recognizing a comrade on an old battlefield. In Caldwell's heart, deep respect stirred. Samuel was not just a veteran, but the man who'd authored protocols the entire security system relied on. Yet he also felt the weight of today's error, a stain he must rectify. The two men faced each other. Their eyes met, wordless, but heavy with a history of sleepless nights, life or death decisions, and scars that never healed. Caldwell saluted, the gesture formal, as if they still stood on a warship's deck years ago. Samuel returned it, slower, heavier, but steady, as he'd faced every challenge. In his heart, there was no room for glory or memories, only Clara, the woman who'd kept him tethered to this world, the one he'd trade everything to protect. A slight nod, in place of words, was his reply to Caldwell. Caldwell turned to the SWAT commander, his gaze sharp as a blade, disappointment unmasked. In his heart, anger flared, not just for the wrong address, but for the haste that harmed an innocent and insulted a legend like Samuel. He didn't need to raise his voice. His words, cold and cutting, were enough to make the commander step back. His heart pounded with unease. His team had attacked an innocent civilian, and the man they faced had written the protocols they were breaking. The commander stammered, grasping for excuses. His confidence crumbled under Caldwell's stare, like a candle before a gust. Caldwell shifted his focus to the young officer who'd tasered Clara. Ethan Hayes stood there, sweat rolling down his forehead. His hands trembled, eyes darting between fear and regret. In Hayes' heart, a wave of guilt surged. He'd only wanted to do right, to follow orders. But now he saw his mistake, the harm he'd caused an innocent woman. Caldwell needed no words. A single cold nod sufficed. Hayes silently removed his badge, placed it on the patrol car's hood, his movements slow, as if shedding a part of himself. He sat on the curb, head bowed, his heart heavy, like a young soldier learning the steep cost of haste. Caldwell drew a sealed envelope from his coat, offering it to Samuel. In his heart, a flicker of hope sparked, that Samuel, once a pillar of the force, would return, would lead again. The envelope held a formal apology and an offer to restore security clearance. A door to past glory reopened. But Samuel didn't look at it. His eyes were on Clara, where she sat, clutching the ice pack, her gaze weary but resilient. In Samuel's heart, all medals, all honors, paled before her. Clara was the only clearance he needed, their wooden house, morning tea, wildflowers he brought home. He spoke, voice low but firm, like a soldier choosing family above all. His clearance now was her. Clara, though exhausted, felt Samuel's gaze. In her heart, a warmth spread. It soothed her pain and confusion. She didn't need to know who Caldwell was, what the envelope held. Samuel was here. That was enough. She gripped the ice pack tighter, as if holding his vow, that they'd overcome, as they always had. The SWAT team stood silent, guns still raised, but the air had shifted. In their hearts, a quiet awe took root, not for Caldwell, but for the man before them, who chose love and mercy over power. Clara woke each day with a new heartbeat, no longer steady as before. The incident at Haywood's corner had left bruises on her body, now fading, but in her soul, a small flame smoldered. She was no longer the woman who quietly brought bread to the Veterans Center, bowing her head before strangers' gazes. Now, as she walked Asheville's sidewalks, her shoulders were straighter, her eyes resolute, as if she'd faced fear and decided it couldn't cage her. In her heart, Clara felt a shift, not anger, but a silent strength, as if she'd reclaimed herself after being knocked down on cold pavement. One morning, standing before the familiar grocery counter, Clara took a can of soup from the clerk, a young man with an awkward smile. "Free," he mumbled. Her fingers gripped the cold metal. It felt like clutching a shard of painful memory. Once, she'd have bowed her head in thanks, avoiding his eyes. But now, Clara stared directly at him, her gaze sharp, unwavering, as if to say she needed no pity, no compensation for what was lost. The young man faltered, cheeks flushing, eyes blinking rapidly before dropping. Clara turned away, her heart lighter, not from victory, but because she knew she'd reclaimed her heart's command. In that moment, she felt she'd crossed an invisible line, where pain was no longer a burden, but a driving force. Samuel, meanwhile, returned to his rhythm, yet each beat carried a new weight. As he bent over rusted bicycles for neighborhood kids, his calloused hands turned the wrench. He wasn't just fixing wheels, but mending his own soul. Each turn was a reminder of battlefield days, where he learned to stay calm on the edge of life and death. Crafting wheelchairs at the Veterans Center, he thought of old comrades, of sacrifices unknown to most, and of Clara, who'd fallen due to another's mistake. In his heart, Samuel bore a quiet pain, not for the incident, but for not being there sooner, for not shielding her from the start. But he chose silence, as he'd faced war, memories, sleepless nights. Asheville had changed. Samuel felt it in every glance. He was no longer just the handyman. He was a living story, a veteran who'd stood before guns and chosen mercy. When patrol cars passed their wooden house, slower now, Samuel knew it wasn't surveillance. It was silent respect. A young officer stopped once, hat in hand, voice hesitant as he thanked Samuel for a wheelchair made for an old comrade. Samuel nodded, his gaze gentle yet firm, as if he understood gratitude sometimes needed no words. In his heart, he felt a fragile peace, not for recognition, but for knowing he'd done right, chosen forgiveness over vengeance. One afternoon, repairing a broken truck, oil staining his hands, Samuel heard footsteps. A young officer, not the one who'd tasered Clara, stood there. His boots scraped lightly on the ground. He hesitated, eyes flickering between curiosity and shame, then asked, "Why didn't you destroy them?" Samuel paused, setting the wrench down. His heart stirred with memories, battles, decisions. Clara convulsing on the pavement. He wiped his hands on an old rag, his gaze sharp, as in his battlefield days. He didn't answer at once. He let silence speak. Then he looked at the officer, voice low, steady, "Because destruction doesn't fix anything." Those words, simple yet heavy, silenced the officer, as if he'd touched a profound truth. In Samuel's heart, those words were a vow. He didn't want to destroy. He'd spent a lifetime building, for Clara, for Asheville, for himself. The community began whispering about Samuel, not just as the handyman, but as a veteran who'd faced death and chosen kindness. Kids called him Hero Sam, their voices bright, clear. Clara overheard, standing by her geranium pots, her lips curved into a faint smile. She knew Samuel needed no titles. He sought no spotlight. For him, each fixed bike, each wheelchair, was his fight against the scars of the past, of the day Clara fell. In Clara's heart, the incident was no longer just pain, It was a steadfast flame, helping her stand taller, gaze steadier, heart unwavering. Samuel understood, though they spoke little. Each evening, when Clara placed a book on his chair, each morning, when he brewed her tea, they knew their love had grown stronger, like a flame that never dies in a veteran's soul. Samuel Carver carried old battles in his heart, yet he never let them spill outward. On the bookshelf in their small wooden house in Asheville, General Caldwell's envelope lay silent, unopened, tucked between a worn war novel and a rusty jar of screws. It wasn't just a letter, it was an invitation to return to the past, to covert missions, sleepless nights, and decisions heavy with life and death. But Samuel didn't need to open it. In him, a steadfast silence had answered. His life now was Clara, Asheville, the things he could mend with calloused hands. Some things, he knew, needed no words to resolve. Each day, Samuel continued his work, not for recognition, but to keep his soul from straying. He bent over rusted bicycles for poor kids, fingers turning the wrench with the precision of a veteran who'd dismantled rifles under battlefield pressure. Each wheel's spin was a whisper from the past, reminding him of fallen comrades, of times he nearly didn't return. Building a ramp for the library, he thought of those who could no longer walk. His heart, hardened by war, still ached faintly. At the Veterans Center, he crafted wheelchairs, each one a silent vow to those who'd fought beside him. In his heart, Samuel bore a quiet pain, not for the Haywood Corner incident, but for knowing, no matter how strong, he couldn't shield Clara from every hurt. But Samuel didn't just fix bikes or wheelchairs. He mended an entire town, not with grand words, but with the quiet authority of a veteran. Asheville, with its stone-paved roads and curious glances, began to see him differently. They no longer saw just the handyman with the rusted red pickup. They saw a man who'd stood at the edge of death, held national secrets, and chose kindness over vengeance. In Samuel's heart, this shift was both comfort and burden. He didn't want to be a hero. He only wanted to be Clara's husband, the one who fixed what was broken, be it wheels or trust. One evening at the Veterans Center, as dim yellow lights cast shadows on photos of old comrades hung on the walls, a young reporter approached Samuel. She stood there, small notebook in hand. Her eyes gleamed with curiosity. "Why only 5 words?" she asked, voice trembling slightly, as if the question held a mystery. Samuel looked at her. His eyes lit up, not from the lights, but from the embers of old wars still smoldering within. He didn't answer at once. In that moment, he saw it all again. The taser's crack, Clara falling, and the 5 words he spoke. Call General Caldwell right now. Like a final command from the soldier in him. He knew they weren't just words. They were the calm he'd forged through years of war, the strength drawn from nameless losses. Finally, he replied, voice low, firm. Because the right words don't shout. Those words, simple yet weighty, spread from the Veterans Center through Asheville, then to nearby towns. They weren't just an answer to the reporter. They were a reminder that a veteran's strength lies not in weapons or shouts, but in kindness and composure. In Samuel's heart, those words were a vow he'd chosen rightly, not for fame, but so Clara could see him as the man she loved, not war's shadow. Each night, returning to the wooden house, he felt a fragile peace, not because Asheville had changed, but because he knew he hadn't let the past define his future. Samuel's story didn't end with him. It lived in the respectful gazes of kids running by, in the quiet nods of patrolling officers, in Clara's smile as she placed a book on his chair. If you believe silence can be stronger than noise, leave a comment saying, "Respect." Share this story. Subscribe to Echoes of Valor to hear about silent veterans, those who mend the world with kindness. Who in your life has silent strength? Tell us below. Samuel Carver needed no medals to prove who he was. He needed only Clara, Asheville, and a veteran's silence. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to let me know in the comments where you're watching from, what time it is for you. It's always thrilling to see who's with us from around the globe. Comment 1 if you found this story gripping, so we can keep bringing you more.